So before I begin, as a prelude to this video, there is also a written form of instructions that you can access by logging into the Main Street website under the Data Squared Documents folder. That email contains the instructions necessary to set up your user ID and password, and will later become your login credentials for use in Dstillery. If you have not received that email, then please reach out to either Anthony or I, and we will get you set up. The first page that you will encounter upon login is the account selection screen. In order to proceed, please select the bottommost account titled simply Town Square.
Welcome.
Distillery Park. Alright, well, maybe it's not that exciting, but I promise you it's way more useful. So without all the theatrics, this is the home page of Distillery, which acts as a simple navigational guide. We can ignore it for now. But you'll notice to the far left, there are a set of icons. These are the basic organizations of the tool, and we'll go over them briefly. The home icon is obviously the home screen, which you are currently on. Next is the light bulb, and this is Explore. This is by far where you will be spending most of your time on the Distillery tool, and it is where all audience analysis occurs. Next is Custom Audience Manager, and this is represented by a paintbrush. And this is where you can view, edit, and manage the custom audiences you have requested the Data Squared team build, filling out the ticket request form in the Main Street site. The last icon is a map tack, and this is a map overlay feature that is actually a really cool tool. Unfortunately, it's still in beta development, but I've gotten to spend some time playing around in this feature, and eventually I encourage you to do the same. But as a first-time user of the tool, this is a feature we can ignore for the moment. The meat of this tool exists primarily within the Explore function, so let's go ahead and click on that. As we move into Explore, you'll notice it's broken down into 7 main sections, with a few subsections existing under Audience Rank. I find it really helpful to think of these as the 7 steps to mastering Distillery, and the remainder of this video is dedicated to teaching you each of these steps in turn. But before we begin, know that this is not meant to be an invasive tool. It's meant to assist, not replace your current sales process. And remember, there are a million different ways that you can use this tool. So as we proceed with this video, don't be afraid to pause, explore, and move along at your own pace. So now let's move on to the first feature of Explore, select an audience. And this is the first step of any analysis that you will undertake. This step provides a simple yet essential function for you to choose a base audience for which you wish to better understand and further deep dive. So you'll notice there are 3 tabs: First Party, Custom Audiences, and Distillery Audiences. The first of these is First Party Audiences. And within this list, you can find all of your first party stations, including those rare instances where you need local events such as Kalamazoo's Ribfest or National's Country Jam. The next tab is Custom Audiences. Here you will find any of the custom audience segments that you have requested the Data Squared team to build, again using the ticket request form found in the Main Street site. It is also where you will find all of your local market station clusters. And these represent your market as a whole and are an aggregation of all of the stations into a single custom audience. Now I've pre-built all of these segments, and you can find them by searching for your local market name in the Custom Audiences search bar. And these are particularly useful because they describe your market as a whole without getting into the individual details of single station audiences. So for general prospecting, or if you really just don't know where to begin, your local market station clusters are a great place to start. The last of these tabs and audience options is Distillery Audiences. And this is the home of your basic segment. Clicking on this tab will present you with the full list of Distillery's pre-built audiences. This is going to be everything from Volvo shoppers to job seekers to furniture buyers. And I will be the first to tell you that I was surprised at just how extensive this list is. So I encourage you to pause here for some discovery. Sift through this list at your own pace. So if you're ready, let's move on. The last important function of this page is the Smart Audience Search tool. As a Distillery Pro, this is where I always begin. So as you are looking for a specific audience to deep dive, this is your go-to. Unlike the standard search function, Smart Audience Search provides you with the definitions for each audience type. The point being, you will have to use the Smart Audience Search tool Define and explain to a client what it means that your market indexes well for this audience and what exactly it means for them. And trust me, from experience, this will become very important. Because right now, you might be thinking,
You serious?
Oh, hell no.
do you really know what a trendy dad is? Another great feature of the Smart Audience Search is that it populates the list based on similar content, not spelling. So if you search for, say, cool dads, but meant trendy dads, fear not. The Smart Search tool will give you the right audience regardless. No other search function in the tool works like this. Oh, and one other thing. If for some reason you cannot find the audience you need, you can request that a custom audience be built and uploaded to the Custom Audiences tab by filling out a ticket request form located on the Main Street site. This will become important or need a specific audience that is a combination of 2 or more individual audiences, like millennial mothers or coffee drinking morning commuters who prefer Dunkin' Donuts. If this is the case, then log into Main Street and follow the links till you reach the Data Square drop-down menu. So once you have selected an audience, you will be taken next to the Audience Snapshot screen. Here, there are 2 tabs within this section, Audience Composition and Category Insights. Audience Composition provides a base overview of your audience. The top part of this section is a basic demographic outline of your audience. And if the data provided seems a bit limited, it did to us too. So be on the lookout for more demographic information coming soon, including household income, household composition, number of children, and so on. And note that all of these are at a national level because we have yet to filter by DMA. The bottom portion of this section displays the top 5 indexes and a few audience type clusters that your audience indexes most favorably with. Notice that the first of these is distillery crafted audiences. And these are individual audiences that can really be about anything, including behaviors, interests, and traits. Next is the location audiences. And these are the actual physical locations that your audience has been to. And we determine this by GPS coordinates. Finally, the section you will see the top 5 websites. And these again are actual websites that your audience is visiting in real time. The next tab is the Category Insights tab. Within this section, several important things will happen. 1, you can filter your audience by DMA so that the insights are localized to your particular market. In order to perform this task, we must click on the US logo located to the far right of the screen. Here we'll be given a list of all town square market and DMAs. By searching for your particular market, you can then select that DMA as the base for all subsequent audience analysis. So before filtering by DMA, these indexes could be interpreted as how much more likely your audience is to portray that behavior compared to the national average. In contrast, as you apply a DMA filter, your audience is no longer more or less likely than the national average, but instead, it is now more or less likely to portray this trait than the DMA average or local market average. So for example, Q103 listeners are 3 times more likely than the DMA average to be trendy young dads. Second is that you can choose from up to 6 different audience category clusters to display. Here's where you really begin to develop the narrative of this audience. And note that you really want to play around a lot in this section, choosing from and selecting from different audience categories until you have the right set of insights that best suit the story that you wish to tell. It also is important to note that these lists are organized by index. So the insights displayed are not what is common about this audience, like country fans going to country concerts, but it is about what makes them unique, such as the fact that a country station audience goes to hip-hop concerts. So there are always exceptions, and there may be country audiences that demonstrate this behavior, but in general, we know that this is unique. So again, indexes are not indicative of common behaviors associated with that audience, but instead, ones that are uncommon among that same audience that make them unique. Now let's move on to step 3 of the distillery process, audience compare. This step allows you to compare your selected audience against any other of your choosing and discover where the commonalities lie between the two. The output will display the overlap reach via a Venn diagram and up to 6 of the most similar category clusters your 2 audiences. If the categories that auto-populate do not fit with your story or you wish to further deep dive the similarities between these two audiences, again, remember that you can click on the three-dot icon to swap in and out different interest categories. For example, if you wanted to advertise
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
a client's brand on two different stations, this is where you could plug those stations in and learn what common messaging would successfully resonate with both audiences universally. You could also compare your set of stations to the local DMA to discover what makes the Town Square listener unique as a whole compared to the average DMA resident. Or equally as interesting, what do podcasters and radio listeners have in common? Well, here is where you can find answers like. So welcome to the final step of Dstillery. So at first this may look very confusing.
Nothing makes sense here, man.
But I promise you, with context, it is not. So the first tip that I would recommend, because this scatter plot and the table represent the same data, we can completely ignore the scatter plot. In my mind, this really just clutters up this screen and makes it a way more confusing than it needs to be. So again, let's focus only on the table. Now, this is just an aggregation of all the different audience categories together in one place. And you could select which type of audience you wish to deep dive by selecting and deselecting from the different audiences represented by the colored dots at the bottom of the screen. So it is here in overview that we can compare our selected audience against location audiences, against crafted audiences, against category cluster audiences, as well as first party and custom. By selecting or deselecting these audiences, it will filter the corresponding table to show only that audience type which you have chosen, and allow you to compare and rank the entire group of these audiences against your selected audience. Note that this is also how you perform station rankings. So by searching for your particular market cluster, you can then rank your stations against the selected audience. And this can be done by searching for your local market within the search bar. And you might notice here that not all of your stations will populate, and don't be alarmed by this. This simply means that there is not enough audience sample size to have a measurement that has statistical significance compared with your selected audience. Over time, however, as we collect more population from each station, this should not be an issue. Aside from ranking stations, Audience Overview is really great for helping you to look into and deep dive particular interest categories or audience clusters beyond the top that are generally the output of all previous steps. So another function of this chart is to calculate the overlap population or reach. This can be achieved by first finding the audience size of your selected audience. And this might require going back to the audience selection tab and figuring out exactly what that population is. And here we can see that it is 6.6 million. So it will be important that you either remember or write that number down. Now, going back into Overview, we can find the reach of any of these audience types by multiplying the composition by the size of our selected audience, which was 6.6 million, if you recall. Again, to get the reach of any particular audience, you need to multiply the composition by the size of your selected audience. And granted, this can be confusing, and I've messed up enough to know. So if you really need help in order to calculate reach, you can either let Anthony or I know, and we will provide you with these numbers for any audience segment that you require. One last tip before I suggest that you pause the video and play around with this tool is that you can filter the chart to only show indexes and sizes of your choosing by sliding these bars. And I find this very helpful when minimizing clutter. And you can see here by doing this that we've minimized a lot of the audience segments that may not be relevant or quite as actionable as some others. As was the case with all other steps, I really suggest that you pause here and play around with this tool. See what kinds of locations and crafted audiences your selected audience indexes or has high composition for. One example might be to see what kinds of QSRs your selected audience frequents. If you're ready, let's move on to the next step. So now that we've completed the basic steps of the tool, we're going to move on to two of what I might consider two of the advanced functions.
Moment of truth.
Now, Website Ranker is a really great tool for understanding the digital behavior of your audience. And while not as straightforward as the other features to interpret the results, it can still provide you with unique value in some cases. What it is a ranking of the top websites that your audience have visited, ranking them against each other. The two metrics each website is ranked against are composition and index. Composition represents the percentage of your selected audience that has visited that site, while index measures how much more likely your audience is to visit the web address compared to the national average. If you choose to use the DMA as a filter, located again here at the top right, then this then becomes how much more likely than the DMA average your audience is to visit this website. What I particularly like about the website ranker is that a website or group of websites can tell us a lot about the selected audience and their buying behaviors, ideologies, and personal preferences. For example, we can see here that Q103 listeners are heavily engaged in business news sites. And this probably means that they are financially focused, they might even be small business owners, or they work in corporate environments. One other great feature of this tool is that the website ranker provides you with a list of real businesses and real locations that your audience has visited. And oftentimes, these websites will be local businesses that are not represented in Dstillery's location audiences. What I find particularly valuable about this is that this list is an easy prospect list with the accompanying VBRs to give you a reason to pick up the phone and call any of these websites that are local businesses. The next of these is Keyword Rank. And Keyword Rank is another cool tool that will list out the top keyword searches performed by your selected. This is great for understanding what your audience's needs are while online and can help you develop the list of, for example, on-air features that are relevant to this particular audience. And for example, if furniture shoppers perform a lot of rush hour traffic searches, then the furniture business might respond well to an on-air sponsorship of rush hour traffic reports. Congratulations, you are now armed with all of the basic distillery skills. But before we wrap up, I want to go over an example of how all of these tools integrate into building VBRs and generating high-value prospects. But before we celebrate, I want to go over one last thing.
We're close, I promise.
So if at the end of this, you're thinking to yourself, well, here is where I hope to answer that. Alright, so let's put all of this together and go over an example of building a VBR that we can pitch to a client. So here I'm going to choose the Albany market just as an example audience to deep dive. And the first thing we are going to
Moving on
do
into website
is
rank,
find either an industry
because a real estate
or a
business
specific
website
business
might not
that we have a
actually
great
have
fit
anything
with,
to do with
i.e. that the
real estate or the
indexes
word
look good
real
for.
estate or home buying or anything like that. It might not be very obvious, and we may have to look through the list manually just to see if we recognize any real estate businesses' websites, or just go with gut feelings, and some of the ones that you feel good about, just click on it and investigate. All right, so just looking through this list, I'm not seeing too many that I would recognize instantly as real estate companies, but some of these you can definitely tell are not. So like Rochester First. All right, that sounds like something could be interesting. All right, let's clicking. Nope. All right, nope, that's not it. Let's move on. All right, let's see what's under that. Like Howard Hanna. That's That sounds interesting as well. All right, most of the time that actually takes me a few more tries than that, but this is perfect. All right, so Howard Hanna is now the real estate company that I think we should be designing this pitch around. Probably one of the first things we want to do is just maybe explore the site a bit for some clues. All right, office locations, that definitely. All right, so it looks like they have 3 Albany offices. That's great to know. But more importantly, if we look at this and kind of just think about this more critically, we can see that that Howard Hanna has 2 distinct target audience types or target customer types: the residential real estate consumer, and it looks like commercial real estate consumers. So this means that we need to prove fit for both of these types of consumers, if we can. You can also look for known competitors within the website rank by hitting either like Command or Control F, and this is to bring up a search bar function that can act like as an analog to the Dstillery tool search function. And if we find competitors, real estate competitors, we could probably use these again, just like Remax, to justify why Howard Hanna should advertise with us, because we have all of their competitors' consumers. Because again, ultimately, the more competitors that index highly with our consumers, the more sales that we could then offer to capture for them, directly from their competitors' market pool, growing Howard Hanna sales while damaging their competitors' sales. And this is an ideal situation, and I think one that any business owner would buy into. All right, so now, finally, let's deal with the supporting fit for their 2 target audience types: residential and commercial. And if we think about it, the 2 audiences that we have found that we index highly for, that are real estate behaviors, are really more typical of, let's say, residential business than commercial business. And if we can't find anything for commercial, both of these are really still generalizable enough about the real estate market that I think we can get away with it. But let's see if we can find something specifically on commercial. I mean, let's be honest too, probably 80% of their business comes from the residential side. So even if we can't find something commercial, then we still have a very powerful narrative to sell in the fact that we could support growth for 80% of their business. But let's see if we can find something commercial. So first, we are going to want to think about, what the target audience is for commercial business, commercial real estate business, and what kinds of behaviors and interests and traits and characteristics or whatever that are most commonly associated with commercial real estate. And once we have a few, we can then search for them directly in Overview. So just off the top of my head, I'm thinking something like entrepreneurs or small business owners might fit the bill for this quote-unquote commercial real estate consumer. So let's see if we can find those. It's like entrepreneur, nope, can't find that. Business, all right, cool. Small business owners, awesome. So, wow, we are on fire. I mean, it looks like right now that we have evidence to support the claim that we fit both of their target audiences, including commercial. So in fact, our listeners are 1.82 times more likely to be small business owners and ergo commercial property owners, buyers, and sellers than the average resident in the Albany DMA. Now, this is pretty much all the information I think we're going to need. So let's just again sit back and make sure you have all this information in your supporting data document so we can put it all together into a narrative that tells the story of our fit, or the Town Square Albany's fit with Hanna Howard.
Give you guys an example of a narrative that I've built. So using only this data and only Dstillery, here's what I came up with. Cue the drum roll. Let's talk about fit. Town Square Albany can offer Howard Hanna access to 14,400 listeners actively in the market for real estate, and an additional 24,700 listeners who are in the initial stages of the real estate decision-making buying process. And this is because our listeners are twice as likely to be active in the market for real estate and 1.7 times more likely to be in the research phase of high-end real estate buying and selling in the Albany market. This represents both long-term and short-term revenue opportunity, as Howard Hanna can convert a large portion of these active home buyers into short-term sales and set in motion the influence to make Howard Hanna the top-of-mind brand when nearly 25,000 local Albany residents make their future luxury home buying and selling decisions. The fit between Howard Hanna and our listeners is so synergetic that we can offer value that extends well beyond your residential sales. We can drive significant results in both your residential sales and your commercial sales. In fact, we can offer you access to 21,500 B2B real estate decision makers in the Albany market who are 1.88 times more likely than market average to have active involvement in commercial real estate buying and selling. And this includes the most profitable consumer types in this market, including entrepreneurs, property managers, and small business owners. But here is the icing on the cake. What makes me so confident of our success is that our audience already has an affinity for Howard Hanna. This is actually how I came across Howard Hanna to begin with. While researching the digital behavior of our audience, I noticed that thousands of our members were visiting howardhanna.com. In fact, our audience, and get this, is 14 times more likely than Albany average to visit and engage with howardhanna.com. And by delivering messaging that hits this audience in one more touch point, and that is radio, and that is something that we can guarantee to deliver, we could easily convert these potential sales into absolute certain sales. This in itself would net positive ROI. But as we have discussed, this only represents a fraction of the value that a partnership with Town Square Albany could bring to Howard Hanna. And I fear, however, that this may be a time-sensitive opportunity, as 15% of our market are also visiting your competitor's site, Century 21. And in order to take advantage of these figures, it is imperative that we get the ball rolling immediately, while our listeners are still in the early phases of this decision-making process. But if we act now, I am absolutely confident that we can easily convert the majority of would-be sales for your competitors into certain sales for howardhanna.com. And this is why I wanted to come to you with this opportunity first, because you rarely see a fit like Town Square and Howard Hanna, especially when you consider that we can support both the growth of your residential and your commercial business segments. Ultimately, though, by choosing to partner with Town Square Media, you stand to gain, at worst, a positive ROI and a guarantee of new business. At best, however, you can expect unprecedented new sales both in the short term and over the next few years in the long term. So now that we have all the facts, cue cool music.
It's time for Let's Make a Deal.
Well, that's how it happened in my mind anyways. In any case, whatever your sales special sauce may be, I guarantee you that with Dstillery, you can empower your sales and drive more business. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. And I know this was a long one, but honestly, stick with it and play around with this tool. You will like it. And if you need anything, make sure to contact Anthony or I. We're here to help. Bye. This is Chris Frampton signing out and letting you know that I will not be quitting my